loyalties to belong to different nations. So don't come and tell me all of we is one and that's the end of the story. We're not one. We are different nations, and the state, in order to accommodate all those nations within a unitary embrace, must be a multinational state. Number two, that political framework which would unite all the nations within a unitary state must conform to the moral value of justice. Maulana Siddiq Nasir has already established it, that this is the trunk, and politics simply emerges from the trunk of morality. So justice must be supreme over the political system and over the political framework. And hence, there must be the political equality of all the nations. You cannot have justice when one nation rules over the other nations. You cannot have justice when there is political subordination to a political superordinate, as has plagued Trinidad and Tobago politics for the last dismal 50 years. All the nations within the state must relate to each other on the basis of constitutionally guaranteed political equality. And this is precisely the model of a state that the Blessed Prophet established in Medina. Number three, there must be a constitutional agreement worked out through negotiations which would protect the basic rights and basic interests of all the constituent nations within that unitary state. I said worked out through negotiation, not through the barrel of a gun. The Blessed Prophet negotiated, skillfully negotiated with all the different tribes to hammer out that constitutional agreement. And he very wisely did not attempt to reach agreement through some Marlboro. No, not through some constitutional conference which brought all the different tribes and nations together under one roof. Not that path. No. What he did was, his method was to engage the major actors in bilateral negotiations. And then, having achieved agreement in bilateral negotiations with the major actors, he then used the fruit of such negotiations and such agreements as the foundation with which to extend the negotiations to engage other actors. Very wisely. Finally, the last characteristic of that plural model of a state is that it had a security clause in it. A strategically important security clause of that constitutional agreement was a clause which prohibited any party to the agreement from supporting the enemy of another party to the agreement. Has this model ever been applied since Medina? I come now to a very interesting part of this presentation. Yes, the British were ruling over India, and I began explaining this to Mr. Tukaram, but I didn't get a chance to explain it in totality. When the British ruled over India, there were two major actors, the Hindus and the Muslims in India. And both of them had the same common goal. They wanted to get rid of the British. But the Muslims wanted to replace British rule with a model of a state in which Muslims could submit to the supreme authority of Allah. That is, Islam would rule over Muslims. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi still remains, in my opinion, the greatest political thinker of modern Hinduism, far superior to Jawaharlal Nehru. Unlike Nehru, and unlike so many of his secular colleagues in the Indian National Congress, Mahatma Gandhi wanted to replace British rule with a model of a state in which Hindus could submit to the supreme authority of truth in Hinduism. And so he recognized a similarity of goals that both Hindus and Muslims had adopted. And he wisely negotiated a Hindu-Muslim alliance so that they could jointly struggle to achieve their goal. That Hindu-Muslim alliance came into being in 1920, but by 1924 a cunning, diabolically cunning British government, I mean they got a PhD in deception, had scuttled the Hindu-Muslim alliance. What would have replaced British rule for Gandhi and for Maulana Muhammad Ali Jauhar, the leader of the Muslims, was a multinational state which would have been a plural model of a state. And it was a plural model of a state because there was a plural society. Trinidad and Tobago is a plural society, and Trinidad and Tobago therefore needs that same plural model of a state. And it was precisely the model that the Prophet had established in Medina. It was for this reason that Gandhi opposed the division of India and the creation of a secular India and a secular Pakistan. Is there a Gandhi in Trinidad who can initiate dialogue for bringing into being another Hindu, Muslim, and this time also Christian alliance, which can lead the struggle for convincing the peoples of this country to embrace another model, the courage to embrace another model of the state, the one that came from London, and to establish a plural model of a state with which we can realize sustainable political unity. I now turn, in the little time that is left for me, to what Islam has to say on the economy. And in Islam, if you don't plant, you don't reap. The market does not distinguish between a Hindu or a Muslim or a Christian. No. In Islam, you don't go and buy from that fella because he's your Muslim brother. Because then the Hindu will go and buy from him because he's a Hindu brother. And the Christian will go and buy from him because he's a Christian brother. No. When you go to the market, there is no religion in the market. When you go to the market, you buy your goods based on the quality of the goods and the price of the goods. And so, if you reap, if you plant, you reap. If you don't plant, you don't reap. Everybody must work. But we recognize that there are some who need to be helped. Men don't make babies. Women make babies. And during the 9 months of pregnancy and after the baby is born, a woman is handicapped. And so Allah has ordained that men must maintain women. If a man cannot maintain his wife, and she does not have the means herself to maintain herself, she is eligible to seek a divorce. And so men maintain women in Islam. And then there are widows, there are orphans, there are those who are disabled, those who are handicapped and so on. And for them there is a social security net. But we don't have affirmative action in Islam. We don't have the state intervening in the economy to give preferential treatment to some over others. Not in Islam. Dr. Muhammad Mahathir did not understand that in Malaysia. And so he uses the resources of the state to build a model of a state in Malaysia, where the resources of the state are used to help out the Malay people because they are disadvantaged compared to the Chinese. No, not in Islam. The Prophet, Allah's blessings be upon him, ordered that we must not intervene in the market. Now, market must be guided by market forces. A man came to the Prophet and said, "O Messenger of Allah, price is too high, bring them down." He said, "No." When the Prophet said no, you have to be a brave man to come back again, eh? But he came back a second time. He said, "O Messenger of Allah, price is too high. Control, price control." He said no. Well, you have to be a madman when he don't tell you twice to come back a third time. But he came back a third time, which meant that prices were really high. What do you do when prices are high in the market? He said, "O Messenger of Allah, control price." He said, "No. But we can pray to Allah to bring down the prices through market forces. Supply increases, demand will be met, prices will be brought down." And so we do not have minimum wage legislation. No. We don't control prices, we don't control wages. Well, if we dispense with minimum wage legislation in this country, I will be a happy man. Oh yes, guess why? Because eventually the country will explode. There'll be bloody revolution in this country if you dispense with minimum wage legislation. Well, why? Why is it? What is wrong with this sick economy? That wealth no longer circulates through the economy. One day for me, one day for you. No, no, no. What is wrong with this sick economy where wealth no longer circulates through the economy? I ain't talking about Trinidad alone, you know. It's the economy around the world today, where the rich are now ensconced in permanent wealth and the poor are imprisoned in permanent poverty. Permanent poverty is oppression. And oppression is the worst of all attacks that you could have on moral values, as Sheikh Nazar has just explained. Allah has prohibited oppression to himself and to his creatures. And this is economic oppression. You cannot solve that problem of poverty with state intervention in the economy. We reject that. It is the market which must bring about change. Well, then Islam says, if the market is to do that, you must have a free and a fair market. That's all. A free and a fair market. And you must have allowances to meet the needs of those who are disadvantaged, women, orphans, etc. The social security net. But there is no free and fair market now anywhere in the world. Some of the frontier thinking on the subject from the State University of New York in Binghamton concluded that the last fruit of politics simply emerges from the trunk of morality. So justice must be supreme over the political system and over the political framework. And hence, there must be the political equality of all the nations. You cannot have justice when one nation rules, guaranteed political equality. And this is precisely the model of a state that the blessed Prophet established in Medina. Number 3, there must be a constitutional agreement worked out through negotiations which would over the other nations. You cannot have justice when there is political subordination to a political superordinate, as has plagued Trinidad and Tobago politics for the last dismal 50 years. All the nations within the state must relate to each other on the basis of constitutional legalities to belong to different nations. So don't come and tell me all of we is one and that's the end of the story. We're not one. We are different nations, and the state, in order to accommodate all those nations within a unitary embrace, must be a multinational state. Number 2, that political framework which would unite all the nations within a unitary state must conform to the moral value of justice. Maulana Siddiq Nasir has already established it, that this is the trunk